The last thing he remembered clearly was the rain.
The last thing Emeka remembered before boarding that bus was the rain. Not the cold. Not the thunder cracking open the Lagos sky like something angry lived inside it. Not even the splash of the Okada that swerved past him and soaked his trousers from the knee down. Just the rain. And then, the bus. But we'll get to that. First, you need to understand something about Emeka Okafor. He was not a superstitious man. He was 29 years old, a quantity surveyor, the kind of man who believed in receipts and deadlines and the central bank exchange rate. He did not pour libations. He did not visit the herbalist his mother used to swear by. He had not stepped inside a church since his mother's burial, 3 years ago, when he sat in the front pew and felt absolutely nothing, which scared him more than grief ever could. He was a practical man. Which is exactly why what happened to him that night made no sense. And exactly why, when it was over, he could never fully explain it to anyone. The meeting had run 4 hours over schedule. His boss, a sweating, impatient man named Fashola who wore the same cologne every day and acted like it made him important, had kept the entire team locked in the conference room arguing about contract margins until everyone in the building had gone home. Emeka stepped out of the office block to find the street changed. Not changed like the rain had moved things around. Changed like the city had exhaled and become something slightly less familiar. The damn foes were gone. The hawkers were gone. The usual orchestra of horns and shouting and Afrobeats bleeding from a generator-powered bar, all of it, gone. The only sound was water hitting asphalt and the distant, low moan of wind moving through the overhead bridge. His phone battery was at 3%. He had just enough charge to see that it was 11:47 p.m. and that he had missed 4 calls from his landlord, before the screen went black. He started walking toward the bus stop. Stay with me. Because what happens at that bus stop is the reason this story exists. The stop was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of the feeling that people had ever been there. The plastic bench had a crack down the middle like something heavy had sat on it and left. The schedule board was rusted, the letters bleached out by years of sun and rain until they read like a language no one spoke anymore. Emeka stood under the narrow shelter and watched the rain. He was calculating whether he could afford a taxi. He couldn't, not at this hour, not with the night surcharge, when he heard it. Not the engine first. The lights first. 2 headlights, far down the road, moving through the rain like eyes opening in the dark. Slow. Deliberate. Not the aggressive push of a danfo driver trying to make up time. Something almost patient about the way it moved. Like it already knew exactly where it was going. Emeka stepped forward. He squinted. The bus was green, a deep, bottle green that the rain made darker and old. Not old like neglect. Old like it had been built in a time when things were made to last forever. The windows were fogged. He could not see inside. It stopped directly in front of him. The door opened. No driver pulled a lever. No conductor leaned out to shout a destination. The door simply opened. Emeka hesitated. Behind him, the rain intensified. A crack of thunder so close he felt it in his chest. He looked left. He looked right. The road was empty in both directions, the kind of empty that made you feel watched. He stepped on. The smell hit him first. Damp earth. Something floral, like the white flowers his aunties used to lay on bodies at the mortuary. And beneath that, something older. Something he had no name for but that his body recognized the way bodies recognize danger before the mind does. His stomach tightened. The bus was full. Every seat taken. Men, women, children, sitting perfectly still, facing forward, hands folded in their laps like they had all agreed on it before he arrived. No one turned to look at him. No one shifted to create space. The only sound was the engine, a low, rhythmic hum that felt less like mechanics and more like breathing. Emeka stood in the aisle. A woman in the third row turned her head and looked directly at him. He felt his heart stop. Not because of how she looked at him. Because of how she didn't blink. She stared at him the way you stare at something you have seen before in a dream you cannot quite remember. Her face was calm. Older than old. She wore a white wrapper tied at the chest, and her neck was covered in coral beads, the kind Emeka had only ever seen on his mother. She patted the empty seat beside her. He sat down. He didn't know why. His legs just carried him there. She did not introduce herself. She did not ask where he was going. She simply leaned close enough that he could feel the temperature drop, and said, in Igbo so clean it sounded like scripture. NWAM, whatever you do tonight, do not look into that mirror. Emeka turned to see what she meant. At the back of the bus, above the rear door, hung a mirror. Rectangular. Framed in dark wood that had warped and cracked with age. Its surface was wrong, not reflective the way mirrors are, but dark, absorbing light rather than throwing it back. Like looking into water at night. He stared at it for 3-4 seconds. Then he turned back around. Why? He asked. But the old woman had closed her eyes. If you already feel something is wrong, you're right. Keep watching. The bus moved. Emeka pressed himself against the window and tried to identify the route. He knew Lagos. He had lived here for 11 years, taking every bus route that existed, memorized the landmarks the way you memorize your own face. He should have been able to tell, within 30 seconds, exactly where he was. He could not. The streets outside were Lagos streets, same potholes, same rusty tin gates, same evangelical church banners tied to every available pole. But the sequence was wrong. He passed Oshodi, fine. Then he passed Ojulegba, which was in the opposite direction. Then he passed the Festac Water Tower, which should have been 30 minutes further south. Then, and this is when his skin started doing something cold and slow, he passed his old primary school. Ilupeju Basic School. Green and yellow walls, broken fence, the mango tree in the corner where he had cracked his chin open at age 7 and cried all the way to the clinic. He pressed his face to the glass. The school was lit up. Every classroom blazing with yellow light. Children moving behind the windows, their small shadows cutting across the brightness. At almost midnight. In a school that had been demolished to make way for a filling station in 2009. Emeka pulled back from the glass. His mouth was dry. He looked around the bus. Still no one moved. Still no one acknowledged him. A boy of maybe 12 sat directly across the aisle, hands in his lap, staring straight ahead with the same hollow stillness as everyone else. Emeka leaned toward him. Where is this bus going? The boy did not respond. Hey. Oya. I'm talking to you. Nothing. Not a flinch. Not a breath. Emeka sat back. His heart was doing something irregular now, a stutter-step rhythm that made him feel his own pulse in his ears. He looked toward the front of the bus, where the driver should have been visible in the rearview mirror. The rearview mirror reflected nothing but darkness. And then, from the back of the bus, from the wrong mirror, he heard it. His name. Emeka. Soft. Unmistakable. A voice that his entire body remembered before his mind did, the particular pitch of it, the warmth underneath the tiredness, the way it had said his name 1,000 times before school, before dinner, before bed. His mother's voice. Emeka, come and see. His hand gripped the seat so hard his knuckles ached. He squeezed his eyes shut. He told himself, you are tired. You are stressed. Fashola kept you in that meeting for 4 hours and your blood sugar is low and your brain is playing tricks. That is all this is. Then the bus stopped. And when he opened his eyes, they were parked outside his mother's house. The house that burned down 3 years ago. The house he had stood outside of at 2 a.m. watching the fire department lose the battle floor by floor, feeling the heat on his face, already knowing she was gone. It was intact. Every window glowing. The bougainvillea his mother had planted along the fence in full impossible bloom. And there, in the window of the upper room that had been her bedroom, a silhouette. Standing still. Looking out. Mama. He said it without thinking. A child's word, torn out of him. The silhouette raised one hand. Don't go anywhere. What he does next changes everything. Emeka stood up from his seat. He didn't plan to look in the mirror. He planned to open the bus door, step out, walk to that window, and find out once and for all whether he was dreaming or losing his mind or experiencing something that his rational brain would later explain away as sleep deprivation and grief. But the door would not open. He pushed. He pulled. He hit it with his palm, then his shoulder. Nothing. The door sat immovable, as sealed as the side of a building. Around him, none of the passengers reacted. The old woman had not reopened her eyes. The boy across the aisle kept staring at nothing. Emeka turned in frustration and looked directly into the mirror. The world shifted. Not dramatically. Not like an explosion or a jump scare. Just shifted. The way a picture frame looks slightly different when you tilt your head. And in the mirror, he saw the bus. He saw every passenger exactly as they were, still, silent, forward-facing. He saw the old woman. He saw the boy. He saw the fogged windows and the dark aisle and the warped wooden frame of the mirror itself. And he saw himself. Sitting in his seat. Gray. His skin the color of ash, the color of something that had been warm once and wasn't anymore. His eyes open but filmed over, the white gone yellow-gray, the pupils flat and lightless. His hands in his lap, still, the same posture as every other passenger. His mouth slightly parted. His own face. Dead. Emeka screamed. It was not a dignified scream. It came from somewhere older than dignity, a raw, animal sound that should have shaken the windows and woken every passenger on the bus. Not one person moved. But the boy across the aisle, slowly, mechanically, like a clock hand completing its rotation, turned his head. And then the woman behind him. And then the man in front. One by one, every passenger on the midnight bus turned to face Emeka Okafor, their filmed-over eyes finding him in the dark, their mouths still closed, their faces carrying no expression that he had a word for. Emeka pressed himself against the door that wouldn't open and could not breathe. The old woman opened her eyes. She looked at him for a long moment. Not with surprise. Not with pity. With something closer to resignation, the expression of someone who has watched this happen before and knows exactly what comes next. You looked, she said quietly. What is happening to me? His voice cracked on the last word like a boy's. What is always happening, she said. What has always been happening since the beginning. You just could not see it until now. I want to get off this bus. I know. Open the door. Let me off. I need to get to my mother. Your mother, the old woman said, and her voice was careful the way you're careful with something breakable, is not in that house, Emeka. She has been at rest for 3 years. What you saw in that window, that was a memory. A remnant. This road holds many of them. Emeka stared at her. Then what is this bus? She held his gaze. Think, she said. Think about tonight. Think about the rain. Think about the road outside the office, the car that came around the corner too fast, the headlights you saw at the last second. Think about why you feel no cold. Why your clothes are dry despite the rain you walked through. Why no one here has spoken since you boarded. The cold started at the back of his skull and moved forward. No, he said. Yes. No. I'm standing here. I'm talking to you. The body is slow to understand what the spirit already knows, she said gently. You were struck, my son. On Oshediopopa Expressway. A tanker took the corner at speed. You were thrown 12 feet. The doctors worked very hard. Worked, past tense. She did not answer. And the silence was the worst answer he had ever received. He's dead. Or is he? Keep watching, because the next part is where this story becomes something else entirely. Emeka sat with it for what felt like a long time. He went through the stages the way you go through them, denial first, a furious, stupid denial where he listed reasons it wasn't true, reasons he was alive, reasons this was a dream or a hallucination or a stress-induced episode. Then something close to anger, though it had nowhere to land. Then, finally, a terrible quiet. He looked at his hands in his lap. They looked normal to him. Felt normal. But the mirror had shown him otherwise, and the mirror, whatever else it was, had not lied. If I'm dead, he said slowly, then where is this bus going? The old woman tilted her head, as if the question pleased her. That depends. On what? On what you carry. On whether your business here is finished. On whether the ones who love you still hold a thread of you to this side. Emeka thought of his younger sister, Adis, 23 years old, still in university, whose school fees he had been paying since their mother died. He thought of the look on her face when he dropped her off at the start of last semester, the way she had hugged him at the gate for a second longer than usual, the way he had almost said something important and then didn't, because there would be time. There would always be time. I can't be dead, he said. Not a denial now. A statement of fact. I have things to do. Everyone on this bus, the old woman said, gesturing at the still, silent passengers, had things to do. Emeka looked at them. Really looked, for the first time. The man in the second row with a briefcase on his knee. The young woman with a baby tied to her back, the baby also motionless, also grey-tinged. The boy across the aisle, 12 years old, hands folded. His throat tightened. Is there a way back? The old woman said nothing. But her eyes moved, just fractionally, toward the front of the bus. Toward the driver. Emeka stood up. He moved down the aisle slowly, half expecting hands to reach out, half expecting the floor to give way beneath him. Nothing moved. He passed row after row of the silent dead and reached the front, where the driver's partition was, a low, frosted screen. He pressed his hand against it. I need to talk to you, he said. The bus slowed. Then stopped. The partition slid open. He had expected anything. A skeleton. A faceless void. A demon from the old stories his grandmother told, the kind with too many teeth and eyes in the wrong places. He had not expected his grandfather. Chief Emeka Okafor. Dead 15 years. The man who had built their family house in Onitsha with his own hands, who could recite proverbs the way other men recited phone numbers, who had held Emeka on his knee and told him that a man who knows where he comes from will always know where he is going. Older than Emeka remembered. Dressed in his chief's attire, the red and white wrapper, the eagle feather. Come the way mountains are come. Permanent. Grandpa. The word came out as a whisper. Sit down, Emeka. Not cold. Not warm. Just settled. Emeka sat in the empty front seat, facing the old man who held the steering wheel of a bus that drove itself. Am I dead? You are between, his grandfather said. The doctors are still working. There is a thread. But it is thin, and it grows thinner the longer you remain here. Then let me go back. I have to go back. His grandfather looked at him for a long moment. In the old man's eyes, Emeka saw something vast. Not cruel. Not kind. Just vast, the way the ocean at night is vast, full of everything you cannot see. Not everyone who asks is permitted, his grandfather said. The road between is not a place for bargaining. But there is something the elders allow, for those who still have their thread. A question. One question. You answer correctly, the door opens. You answer wrongly, he gestured, without drama, at the bus behind them. You join them. Emeka's jaw was tight. He nodded. Ask it. His grandfather folded his hands. What is the only thing a man carries from this world that weighs nothing, yet holds everything? The silence stretched. Emeka had been good at school. He had won his local government mathematics prize at 16, graduated top of his department, built a career on precision and logic. But this was not a question logic could reach. He felt logic trying, cycling through possibilities, constructing arguments, and finding nothing that held. He closed his eyes. He went back. Not strategically. Just, back. He remembered his mother's voice calling him in from the street at dusk. His grandfather's hands, enormous and dry, closing around his small ones. Adi's laugh, the specific, embarrassing volume of it in a quiet restaurant. His friend Connor saying, "I told you so," after a football bet with the exact tone of a man who has waited years for the moment. The woman at the corner shop near his office who always included extra pepper without being asked because she had noticed, once, that he liked it. He remembered every person who had ever said his name and meant something by it. His name, Emeka said. His voice was quiet. Certain. His grandfather waited. The only thing a man carries that weighs nothing but holds everything is his name. Spoken by the ones who love him. His mother says it and it's a shelter. His child says it and it's a legacy. His friend says it and it's proof that he was real, that he was here, that he mattered. You can bury a man and lose his body to the earth. But his name outlives everything. He opened his eyes. His grandfather was looking at him with an expression Emeka had not seen on any face in a very long time. Pride. Your mother used to say, the old man said quietly, that you were the child who listened. The bus stopped. Not gradually. Completely. As if the concept of motion had simply ended. The door opened. Not the back door, not the door Emeka had boarded through. A door at the front, beside the driver's partition, that had not been there before. Beyond it, not a street, not a road. White light, the clinical kind, and a sound distant, rhythmic, that Emeka recognized after a moment as a heart monitor. His heart monitor. He stood up. Grandpa. His grandfather had already turned back to the wheel, his profile still, at peace, looking at a road only he could see. She is proud of you too, the old man said. She says tell Adis to eat more. She always forgets to eat. Emeka laughed. The sound of it surprised him, full and cracked and wet all at once, the laugh of a man who has not cried yet but is about to. He's going back. Or is he? Watch the ending carefully, because there's one more thing. He stepped through the door. 3:14 a.m. Lagos University Teaching Hospital. The machine screamed before anyone in the ward understood why. Then the line, flat and silent for 41 minutes, spiked. Once. Then again. Then again, building rhythm like a drummer finding the beat. The doctor, a young woman named Dr. Fasania who had been awake for 18 hours and had already begun composing how she would tell the family, grabbed the nearest nurse's arm and said nothing for several seconds, because her medical vocabulary had temporarily left her. Emeka Okafor opened his eyes. The ceiling of the ward was white and water-stained and the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Every light in the room was too bright. Every sound was too loud, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, the rhythmic gasp of the ventilator being removed, someone in the corridor asking about a trolley. He felt his body as a heavy, wonderful, painful thing, full of protest and damage and life. A nurse leaned over him. Can you hear me? What is your name? He opened his mouth. His voice came out broken, thin, barely more than breath. Emeka, he said. My name is Emeka. Later, 3 days later, when he could sit up and hold a cup, the hospital psychologist came to speak with him about what patients sometimes experience during cardiac events. Near-death experiences, she called them. She had a clipboard and a gentle, practiced voice and she was prepared for him to describe a tunnel or light or a feeling of peace. He told her he had been on a bus. She wrote something down. He did not tell her the rest. Not about the mirror. Not about his grandfather. Not about the impossible answer to an impossible question. But that night, when Adis arrived, late, still in her university hoodie, hair undone, eyes red from the 5-hour drive she had made alone at 2 a.m. the moment she sat beside his bed and held his hand and didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, I didn't eat today. I was too scared. Emeka stared at the ceiling. He thought about an old man in chief's attire holding a steering wheel to nowhere, turning slightly to say something over his shoulder. Adis, he said carefully. You need to eat more. She frowned. What? Who told you to say that? He squeezed her hand. Mama, he said. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room completely, not empty, not hollow, but full. Full of everything that cannot be explained, everything that travels across the place between, everything that a name, spoken with love, can carry. Outside the ward window, Lagos was doing what Lagos always does, breathing, shouting, surviving, moving. A city that never fully sleeps. And somewhere on a road that doesn't appear on any map, on a route that runs between the world you know and the one you pretend doesn't exist, a green bus moved through rain that never ends, carrying its passengers with patience, with quiet, toward whatever comes next. The mirror at the back showed everything. For those who dared look. And now you understand why the old woman said what she said. Because the mirror was never the danger. The danger was learning the truth before you were ready for it. Don't board any midnight buses. And if you do, for the love of everything, don't look in the mirror. If this story gave you chills, you already know what to do, share it with someone who needs to stay up tonight.